listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Michael, it was supposed to be a slow week in the NFL. We got a lot of stories, buddy. And
it's never a
Foxborough is where our first story will lead us, man. What's going on? Everybody's been asking. They said, all right, what's going on? We're waiting for the GM Shuffle. We're seeing the Florio report from Pro Football Talk about Bill Belichick shopping Mac Jones to multiple teams this offseason. What's really going down there in New England?
I think if you understand how trades are made, or you understand how actually you're trying to create a trade market, shopping isn't what you do. When you're shopping a player, you are trying to get rid of a player, and the teams know that the end is coming near. So I'll call you on the phone and say, hey, Femi, do you have any interest in Joe Fugazi over here? And you say, I might. Okay, well, we might be interested in moving him for the right number. Okay, now I'm lying, right? We're going to get rid of him for any number, but you kind of sense that. So you go back and circle with all your people, and then you call me back and says, we would probably be interested in Fugazi maybe for like a sixth if. Okay, well, that's too much. So now I got you engaged, right? You're interested. So that's trade talk, right?
It's kickstarting everything.
Kickstart everything. That is shopping. This isn't shopping. You call me up and say, you going to move Mac? I'm not, probably not. Why? What are you offering? That's not shopping. So did someone do that? Did the Raiders or the Chiefs? I don't know. I'm making it up, right? Did the Texans call Bill and say, "Are you going to move? Mac?" And he said, "What are you offering?" Because every player is available, right? But not every player is being shopped. So the idea that he's shopping Mac that's against everything he would do. First of all, he's the most secretive person in the league. He's not going to tell you anything he's doing. Even some people in the organization don't know. But if somebody comes to him and says, I'll give you a 1 for Mac, okay, does that mean he's shopping him? No. That just means somebody asked the question. So I think we're in a semantical issue here. I'm not defending him because I know he's not shopping Mac. But I'm not saying that Florio's report is completely wrong, because I wouldn't be surprised if Nick or if some other team called him up and said, because they're reading all the shit in the paper, okay, I wouldn't deny that. But that's not shopping. That's not shopping. When I'm trying to trade you Joe Fugazi, I'm shopping his ass. And there's an end date. There's an end date. Or if the player says, I want to get traded. Okay, we'll do that. So I think it's a lot of it is for clicks. I really do.
And usually, like the scenario that you pointed out with Joe Fugazi, that player is usually going to get cut.
That's the bluff, right? Yeah. Well, we're not cutting him. I would tell you, Femi, we're not cutting this guy. So if you don't want to trade for him, then you're just going to have to watch him. Well, fuck, I'm going to eventually cut him.
It's like a week later, then they get cut, then everybody jumps in, and then the interest starts to build. And this, I think, why it's got so much circulation, I believe, is just because going all the way back to last offseason and the whole offensive coordinator deal with Joe Judge and Matt Patricia, it feels like a lot of people think that Belichick and Mac Jones are at odds, and almost that Mac Jones is upset with the way the offense was orchestrated and all that stuff. I see you laughing. Is that? Are we reading too much into this?
No, I think Mac Jones is upset. I think they're upset with Mac Jones's behavior. I think this is a two-way street. I think there's accountability on both parts. The other day on the Daily Coach, we wrote about Steve Kerr and Bob Myers, the general manager of the Golden State Warriors. After Game 6 against Toronto, Kerr walks into the locker room. They just won 2 in a row. They've just won 2 in a row. And Kerr says to Myers when he sees him, I really screwed up. I messed up the rotation. And Myers says back to Kerr, I really screwed up. I didn't give you enough pieces. Both men were accountable for what they felt was sincere accountability, okay? Did the Patriots mess up with their decision with the staffing? I think that's fairly obvious, and I think he's admitted that, okay? So that's one. Did Mac Jones's behavior conducive to that of an ultimate leader? No, he's got to admit that too. So there's culpability on both sides. This isn't a one-sided let's favor the player route. Let's understand the player has to show sincere accountability for his behavior, his lack of maturity. I mean, the tackling on the some of that late tackling stuff on the field, that didn't endear himself with his teammates either. So he's going to have to cover that up. He's going to have to show that he's mature too. Like, the only way they're going to improve together is they both admit. Now, the Patriots have admitted they've changed staffs. They new line coach, new offensive coordinator. Mac's got to have accountability. So to me, this isn't like, I said this on the pod during the year, Femi. I said, like, the more Mac keeps turning the ball over, he's going to lose his job. He can blame whoever he wants, but he keeps throwing the ball to the other team. He's not going to stay out there as quarterback.
Yeah, that's why we had the little Bailey Zappi moment there. You mentioned Mac's behavior. The unsportsmanlike stuff that we saw on the field, we all saw that. Is there other stuff that you would be at liberty to...
I would just say that. You know, I mean, that was obvious to everybody. That was an immature, and his teammates saw it.
And going cleats up on a guy when you're sliding.
I mean, his teammates saw it. So, look, he's got to win the locker room back over, too, with his behavior. Like, this isn't going to be one of those where, hey, Mac, you're a legend. You know, this isn't Tom Brady. Let's not, like, I like Mac.
Player.
Mac is a good player with a good arm, but he has to rely on his accuracy, his intelligence, and most importantly, for Mac, he's got to be the leader. He's got to show competitive leadership, not selfish competitive leadership. There's a difference there. Like, Mac is competitive. Brady was competitive, but he was team competitive. Mac's got to understand that.
No, we've seen it. He's very fiery, Mac Jones. I mean, like, he might not give that off when you see the headshot or whatever, but we've seen him even when Josh McDaniels was there. They would get into like, hey, like what are we doing on offense and all this stuff. And
well, I mean, Mac's, look, Mac, it comes from an upbringing where, I say upbringing, generation where, I mean, we're seeing this in the college basketball tournament where it's hard to coach some of these kids in this generation because let's be clear, their parents have told them since they were babies how great they are. Barbershop Mike never told me I was great. I mean, fuck. I go to therapy for years. I mean, that's why I belong to the Church of Springsteen. I mean, because you don't have any therapy. We all, from my generation, you need fucking therapy because you grew up in an Italian family. You got shoes thrown at you. You were told you were no fucking good. You weren't going to go anywhere. Like, just get a job somewhere. Like, that's how we were raised. It's different today. Oh, everything's okay. Don't worry. You ever see the Sebastian Maniscalco stuff when he goes into that whole, oh, it's okay. Don't worry. Even though you took a crap in the living room, it's okay. We'll clean it up. It's no problem. It happens. Like, if that happened in my barbershop, I would have been outside. I slept 2 days in the yard. I mean, come on.
You mentioned the maturation of Mac Jones. I think a lot of people think, and at least this is where my brain goes, him seeing this, his camp seeing this, his agent seeing this report, whether it's true or not, and it's probably semantics, does that then get them a little bit charged up to where they get to the point of, hey, we want to ask for a trade. We no longer want this situation.
Come on. Look, fear does the work of reason. Mac is at a crossroads of his career. He's got to play good. Nobody's going to want him next year if he doesn't play good.
Yep.
And the reason I have hope that he is going to play good and truly believe he can play good is because he did it his rookie year. And it's there. As Walsh used to say all the time, if the player shows us he can do it, we got to believe he can do it, right? So we know he can do it. Now, it's just he's got to come in and be self-reflective and say, look, I can do these things, and I'm going to do it. And everybody makes this thing like him and Bill O'Brien have this long-standing relationship because they, he coached him at Alabama. Like it's all a mystery. Like it's not true. It's like most things that happen. It becomes more perception than reality. They had like 2 days together. Mac helped him understand what they were doing at Alabama. Period. End of story. Now, Billy will coach him hard. Billy's going to be more like Barbershop Mike. He's going to go in there and, tell you he's going to call you out when you don't do it.
Yeah, we've seen him get in the shouting match with Tom Brady.
So it's going to be hard coaching. It's going to be demanding coaching. And Mac's got to take it in. Like, it's just, to me, this is one of the issues you have with the way the coaching, the longer you're in coaching, if you're not in tune to the changes. Why is Jay Wright not coaching at Villanova? The guy's brilliant, and you watch him on TV, he's tremendous, right? Because he knows his style of coaching isn't conducive to the NIL.
Yeah.
He kind of knows this. So the kids are going to leave. I mean, Frank Martin, the head basketball coach at UMass, I just read yesterday, they lost like 5 guys. Frank Martin's going to coach you hard.
Coaches hard.
He's going to coach you hard. And if you don't like it, you're going to leave. So this is the world we live in, and you got to figure out and modify how we do it.
It's whether he's being shopped, we don't think he's being shopped.
No. I'm going to say it correctly. He is not being shopped. Like
okay.
The report's erroneous. I'm defending Florio on the sense that I don't know, because I've never asked, if somebody called them up and said, would you trade him? But the active, what I said to you with Joe Fugazi is the activity of we're actually out there. We're going to shop this player is wrong. Like shopping players that you want to trade should never exist. Because if once you know you do that, once I pick up the phone and call you up and say, I'm trying to trade Joe Fugazi, you're going to call your sources, who you talk to, who are helping you. Hey, I just got a call from the Patriots, and I think they're shopping Joe Fugazi. It's out there immediately. So I know as an executive, if I call you up, like I know I could sit here today, and if I was back in the league, I could look, and I know whatever GM I called, I would know where that story would get leaked. So why would I do that? Belichick's way smarter than I am. Shit, he's going to know that. So he's not saying, hey, I'm going to trade Mac Jones. He knows the repercussions of it. But now, can he stop somebody from asking? Of course not. I mean, okay, if I called Andy Reid and said, you going to trade Pat Mahomes? He's going to say no, right? But does that mean he's shopping Pat Mahomes? Of course not.
No. So do you think, because I'm interested to see where this story came from, and we would never find out, but is this a rival team trying to poison the well here? What's going on?
I think people are enjoying what's going on in Foxborough.
Yeah.
Look, I say this all the time. I mean, Ron Rivera's been in the playoffs 3 times, right? He hasn't had a winning season in 6 years. There's no heat on him at all. Belichick's got 6 Super Bowls. If he doesn't win this year, he's fired. Like, think of that.
Is he losing his fastball?
Losing his fastball. Like, the reality of it is when you win, people want to tear you down.
Yeah, we're on to the next. That's what we are as a society. We want to see the greats, but we build you up just to tear you down. But you got to be built up first. And 6 Super Bowls will build you up quite a bit. So that's the skinny on what's going on in Foxborough. On the other side, though, as we take our first break, we're going to discuss what's happening in Baltimore. The Ravens don't want to talk Lamar Jackson. Well, we will next here on the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
We've talked a lot about Lamar Jackson this offseason, Michael, because he's a non-exclusive franchise taggee.
I would say it's more than a lot. I would say it's excessive.
It's getting on gross amounts, but it's the biggest story in the NFL right now.
You know, I was listening to Drew Rosenhaus on Pat McAfee yesterday, and he was saying, you know, if I represented him, there would be a deal. And I don't think Drew is selling it as like, hire me. I think he's
just being honest.
I think he's honest. I think if Jimmy Sexton represented him, there'd be a deal.
Or David Mulugeta, who's now one of the new up-and-coming power brokers.
There would be a deal. I mean, I just truly believe, before we talk about this whole situation, that this is really, if you are a sports management teacher in some of these classes in America, I recommend Gridiron Genius be part of your curriculum. That would be first. Second, I would recommend using this as a case study to understand the value of what an agent brings to the table.
100%.
You know, and Lamar's in a situation where he doesn't have to pay the full freight. Like, he could call Drew on the phone and say 1%, Drew.
Yeah.
Or he could call Sexton on the phone and get CAA behind him and say 1%, Jimmy. You know, or David, and he could just say, hey, 1%, you know, and let them clean up this mess that has started on draft day. You know, I know we weren't going to go down this road, but I want to go down it anyway because it's on the tip of my head. Like, I watch these college players, and to think that Anthony Richardson is worthy of a 3rd or 4th pick in the draft isn't absurd. It's absurd squared. It's absurd squared. Like, it's not even, like, athletically, if we're running the Olympics, okay.
Yeah.
I get
100%.
it. You watch his tape, it's absurd to think that this young man's ready to play professional. It's not fair to the young man to play professional football. He's so far, he's 2 years away from being a year away. Okay? Let me just put that out there. and I like Anthony Richardson. I have been a fan of his. I love his skill set. I do not love his tape. Let me be clear. I do not love his tape. The fact that he's being talked about in the top 10, which I do not believe will happen, right?
Ooh.
I don't. I mean, look, Malik Willis last year was in the top 10. Go through all your mock drafts. Nobody grades these mock drafts. Nobody looks at them next year. Like, it's one of the biggest mistakes we make in drafting is, and teams do this too, Femi, is they don't spend the first part of their draft preparation going over last year's draft preparation. They don't do that. They don't sit there and say okay, here's where we were looking, here's who we were counting on. This is what they don't spend enough time on that. That's separate. The other thing they don't do is they don't sit there and spend time on what mocks and what these mock guys were saying. I mean, Willis was in the top 10. Go look at Todd McShay's mocks. Go look at
number 2 overall to Detroit.
Go look at some of these mocks. You can't be that wrong. Oh, missed it by a little bit. No, you were way fucking wrong.
How about the next day?
Like you were the next day, at the end of the next day. Like, right? So you can't be. So my point, what I'm trying to make is it comes back to Lamar, is Lamar sat in that green room for 31 frickin' picks. This is a true story I'm about to tell you. Okay, so they're in the draft. And Bisciotti, the owner, is seeing this go on. And he's urging the powers to be in Baltimore. We should take a shot at this. We should go after him. Look, if he's going to slip, let's go. And Ozzie, being smart that he is and wonderful, he went up and got him. It was Bisciotti who drove this train.
Wow.
It was him in the room. He was like the values, because Bisciotti's a smart guy. He sees value that this is slipping. And it had no reason. And the reason it slipped is because he didn't have an agent. He didn't have somebody out there campaigning for him. Trey Lance going third with never playing football is a ridiculous thing. It's as ridiculous as Anthony Richardson going third or fourth. It makes no sense at all. You've got to be able to bring something to the table. And Lamar won the freaking Heisman Trophy. He was the best player in the ACC for 2 years. You know, I mean, and he's going 32, and we're talking about taking Anthony Richardson at 3, 4, 5. It makes no sense at all. But again, the void of an agent. And I'm not shilling for him to hire somebody. I'm trying to make him aware of a lot of these problems he's facing today is because he lacks representation, not because somebody has a vendetta against him.
It's almost self-inflicted.
I believe it is. I would, if he were my son, I would say we need an agent. I love mama, but we need somebody who's professional. That's why. Now, we don't have to pay 4%. We don't have to pay 8%. We'll pay whatever we want. We're talking about a huge deal.
I was talking with my brother about this yesterday because we were talking about the same thing. But hey, Lamar really needs to get an agent, and we were almost comparing Lamar this offseason to Deshaun Watson last offseason, and the way the Deshaun Watson thing was being framed, and it's like, the Deshaun Watson sweepstakes and all this stuff. It's like this guy was also allegedly like a predator and all this stuff with all the baggage he had off the field. And then Lamar Jackson, because he doesn't have that PR campaign behind him, it's Lamar's getting in business with some weird shady guy in Florida, and Lamar's doing this and Lamar's doing that. It's like that's right there, just the difference between Lamar and Deshaun, the way they've been perceived, is the power of an agent.
Who is a better collegiate player, Tua or Lamar?
Oh, Lamar Jackson, without question.
It's not even close, right?
Yes,
I mean, Tua's a nice player.
Lamar's in a different stratosphere.
Completely. Tua went to the 4th pick overall in the draft?
Yeah, I think it was 5. Five.
5 coming off an injury, right? He threw in an Arena League field. I mean, it looked like it was a cow patch that he threw.
Backyard.
It was a backyard. I mean, we're gonna play 4-on-4 football here. Okay, Tua was my first pick. So all strategic. Lee Steinberg, wonderful. If Lee Steinberg was managing this, it would be completely different. He would be controlling the narrative all over. This is what they do. This is their business. Their business is to control narrative. And we're so gullible, we'll buy it. You know, I mean, it's like, what's that opening scene in season 5 of The Sopranos? The American people so
I haven't gotten there yet.
I know, but they'll buy anything as he's puking out the side of his car. I mean, like, it's true. And so I think a lot of this is problematic. And I think that nobody's putting together a deal. Like, if you're I keep saying this, or you're the Colts, which I think, to me, and I've been studying a lot of these tapes, if you are the Colts, you can't take Richardson. You can't. There's no way you could take
even
Richardson.
with Steichen and the six-back offense.
I don't think you can. I mean, Femi, the guy has a hard time completing. Think about your guy, Justin Fields. What did he go, 11th?
Yeah, it was just outside the top 10.
He went outside the top 10. He had a better collegiate career than Richardson.
He had better tape.
No, you can't dispute that. I wouldn't dispute that, and I'm not a Fields guy. So, to me, you can't take him because you're basically saying Gardner Minshew's our starter.
Mm-hmm.
You're not putting him out there because you're going to destroy him. First of all, the athleticism is incredible. But when he gets on the field, he's facing other athletes that are incredible as well. You're going to destroy the kid. So the only logical pick to me for the Colts, just logic and tape, is Levis. That's the only logical pick. It's the only one you could make.
Even with what we've talked about with Levis and the robotic footwork.
I'm not in love with Levis.
Yeah.
To me, if I were Chris Ballard, I would be all over Lamar because I think Levis and Richardson have huge risk to them. Mm-hmm. I think Stroud has risk to him.
Yeah.
I don't think Young does, although I would acknowledge 5'10", there's no history on that. I acknowledge that. But I think he's rare. I think he's got it. But to me, this notion that Ballard has to trade up to 3 to get Richardson, it's a bordering on the Willis will be in the top 5 picks last year. It's that stupid. It's that stupid.
And that's based on folks you've talked to.
It's based on what I see on tape. It's folks I talk to. Like, people tell me the people that I talk to, Richardson's not even going to go in the top 10.
Man, I'm looking at Daniel Jeremiah's freshly minted mock draft he put out this morning, Florida, Indianapolis. That's the connection everyone's making.
Well, because it solves the problem, but it doesn't solve the problem, right? Okay, we take Richardson. What are we doing with him? What are we doing with him? We're going to run the. I mean, what offense are we going to run? How are we going to run this offense? He's athletic. I get that. I mean, they picked Jalen Hurts in the second round. Jalen Hurts had a better career collegiately than Richardson's had. At some point, your tape has to back up your play. You know, look, I'm not a Hendon Hooker. Hendon Hooker. I'll call him H. Hooker.
Hooker from Tennessee.
You know, but he's really accurate, okay? He's really accurate. He's got great touch on the ball. He throws all the throws. He's very good in the pocket. They only run really one protection, slide right or slide left, so it isn't like he can control it. It's a very simplistic offense, but he has more of a upper side. Now, he's going to be hurt, and he's 26 years old, so to me, I don't see how you pick him in the first round because you're basically, you got to redshirt him, and you got to pick up the 5th year. What are we doing? But to me, my point is his college tape is better than Richardson's college tape. I think we're making a huge mistake believing the shiny object out there is going to go, and these mock drafts support it, so we just perpetuate that. And if Lamar went 32 and took the owner of the Ravens, Steve Bisciotti, to urge his people to go get him, this is fact, then how is Richardson the third pick in the draft?
It really does make you wonder. And it's more so like for me from the Lamar side of it, it's just like this could have helped him going all the way back to college. But the last point I want to bring up on Richardson, we'll talk more Lamar on the other side of the break. Richardson, in fairness to him at Florida, we're not seeing any Florida wide receivers talked about in the first 100 picks of this draft.
I think that's crap. I think it's crap because when you're an elite athlete like him.
They had a lot of guys dropping balls out there. That's on tape as well.
Yeah, but there's a lot of times on tape. Even the Utah tape. You watch the Utah tape. That's supposed to be as great. He had great plays in the Utah tape. It was not a great tape. He had great plays. There's a difference between having great plays and having great tape. He had great plays. That's the thing about Richardson. Richardson has great plays. And if you just watch, like Jamarcus Russell, as bad as his work habits and all that crap, he was a better collegiate player than.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
He was a better collegiate player.
People make fun of it now, but he was like a legitimately good quarterback at LSU.
I mean, he had, so like, again, Richardson needed another year to go back. I don't think he can fool anybody with this. I think he's fooling mock drafters. I think he's fooling Jeremiah. And I like Daniel. I think Daniel does a good job. I just think you got to be honest with, like, this tape doesn't justify giving him all this money.
But to go back to the point that you made about Mac Jones, though, if they've shown it on tape with the good plays, Can't you get that out of them?
The loose play. They're not plays structured. They're loose plays. They're plays that break down. That's a different ballgame.
All right, we'll talk more about this on the other side. We will get to Lamar Jackson and what's going on with the Baltimore Ravens. This is the GM Shuffle Podcast.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, well, the reason why we kicked off that discussion talking quarterbacks here is to get to Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. I think I screwed that up. No, you didn't screw it up. I thought it was a great discussion,
I know
Michael.
We had it planned on that. No, but to me, it's just, it kind of flows together, the point about having someone rep you.
Yeah. No, I think the beauty of podcasts is that we can color outside the lines. Yeah. You know, we can color outside the lines and hopefully make a Picasso. So we're hoping this episode ends up being.
Well, thinking about Picasso would have been very upset with us because Picasso, there's two kind of artists in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And this is kind of an interesting, and I've been reading this in this book, which is fascinating about artists and creativity. But there are two kind of people that create, right? There's the one who Picasso was a planner. So everything that he ended up drawing, he started on a board, and then he kind of progressed before he actually went to paint. And then there's this Cezanne who just starts painting and figures out, where am I going? And then the creativity as he goes. So he's like coloring over his board constantly. I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there, and without a plan. And I think that creativity, there's often times where when you are creative, if you have an idea and you lay it out, you don't really know where it's going, but you lay it out to where it is. Like, I think that as a team, as an executive, that's why I think if you're in any leadership position, you should read a lot of books on creativity. The great Peter Kaufman, it's a tremendous guy in my life. Peter Kaufman runs Glen Air Industries in Glendale, Arizona, and Glendale, California. Tremendous human being. It really has been a great influence in my life. And you know, he urged me to read books on creativity because of it allows you to think differently and plan it out. And so I think in situations like Lamar, that's what's missing is through creativity. You know, you've got to have some way to be creative in your job to find alternatives. You know, one of the great things about Belichick and Walsh, and I talk about this when I do presentations, is they force you to, you know, it's never A or B with Walsh or Belichick. It's never. It's C, D, E, or F. And if you're not prepared to give them C, D, E, or F, then you're not good at your job. And so for this Lamar situation, if you're Chris Ballard, you know, it's not Will Levis or Lamar. What is the alternatives here? And you've got to kind of constantly work through that and come up with a solution. And sometimes the solution is the first one you come to.
Well, what's the solution for the Baltimore Ravens? Because earlier this week, at their draft luncheon kickoff press conference,
which I don't know why they do.
I don't know. Like the pre-draft presser is the week of the draft. Like, what are we doing with this?
I mean, you know, the buzzer should be going off. He's lying the whole time he's up there, the poor guy. I mean, DeCosta's up there. Now, what do you expect him to say? You know, like, seriously, well, you do know he's going to get an A for the draft. We do know that. Yeah, that's a lot. But
put it in pen.
Put that down in hard ink. I mean, get Ben Franklin's pen out.
We're going to put cement.
Yeah. I mean, so I think, to me, what do you expect him to say? I mean, so what are his options? His options are, he can't seem to get a deal done with Lamar. You know, they've kind of hinted to what they've offered, which has been really good. I think if Lamar stays on the tender and plays, then I think he probably becomes a free agent. They're not going to tender him again at 120% or 130% of the $32 million. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's going up now all of a sudden you've paid him 32 and
like 40s, something, whatever it is.
All right, so you add those two numbers together.
That's what Washington did with Kirk Cousins.
And that's what they got in a huge mess, right? So, you know, that's not at all. And Lamar's young enough that he's going to kind of keep earning that income in spite of all people keep thinking he's going to get hurt. It's funny. A guy emailed me the other day and said, you know, I disagree with you. And I appreciated his email because he said, I disagree with you. Lamar's always going to get hurt. And so I wrote back, what about Jalen Hurts? Well, Jalen, like everybody kind of picks and chooses who gets hurt.
100%.
Which I don't agree with. But to me, if Lamar stays on the tender, it really doesn't do Baltimore any good. And does he play on the tender? Does he play if he gets dinged on the tender? I mean, those are hard things for DeCosta and the Baltimore organization to process.
Well, what did you make of when the reporters at this press conference were trying to ask him a question about Lamar Jackson? And it wasn't even DaCosta or the head coach, John Harbaugh. It was a PR person for the Baltimore Ravens that shut it down and said, hey, we're not talking Lamar Jackson here. This is a draft luncheon. They seem to be over it, even though I don't blame the reporters because I was talking with our producer. It's like, if you go back to your editor and they ask you, hey, did you ask about Lamar? It's like, no, I didn't ask. They'd be like, all right, turn in your badge. Like, you don't work here anymore.
I agree. I mean, when you have that, you know you're going to get hit with it.
Yeah.
And so, and that was preordained, right? So I'm sure that because Baltimore is very, and I want to underscore the word very, Baltimore is very, very good PR-wise. They're very good at controlling the narrative. They have a lot of sources within the league, whether it's at the league level, whether it's at the football level, Pro Football Talk, whatever they do. They can control narratives. They're good at it. They're very good at it. I say that respectfully. I don't say that criticism-wise. So, they knew what they were getting into, and they had a staff meeting. I'm very comfortable in saying, I can't say this with 100 degrees certainty, but knowing how organized they are, I have no doubt that they had a staff meeting before this luncheon, and they made sure that the PR guy killed the Lamar thing so that DaCosta and Harbaugh didn't have to kill it. This was preordained. Like they said, no, you kill it so we don't have to kill it, because then it looks like we're avoiding it. Right. But you're right. Like, you're going to open it up this forum. How are we not going to talk about it?
It's the biggest question with the organization.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure why they wouldn't even have a canned response. Maybe they just don't want to say anything or put any effort into it.
I don't know what they can say. Like to me, look, are they shopping Lamar? They are, because they put that tender on him. So they said, basically, call us. Are they getting any action? Probably not. Now, to me, again, would I take Will Levis or would I sign Lamar? Well, one's really cheap and I could have him, but one has a lot of potential for mistakes. The other one has potential for it's expensive and it may get hurt. I got to weigh those out, and I've got to really do my due diligence to see where I'm going.
The Ravens pick number 22 in the draft in a few weeks here, and they did not poo-poo the notion of potentially drafting a quarterback.
How could they?
Nor should they. Because we all see it that, hey, what's the next step after Lamar Jackson, if that indeed is how this thing plays out here. They said that they're pretty much open to drafting quarterback in the right scenario. Is this a situation to where it just makes so much sense with Baltimore and Indianapolis? Move up to number 4. We'll give you Lamar Jackson, and you can either take Levis or Richardson or
depends on where they have Levis.
That is another.
We just kind of dismiss the grading systems in these draft preparations. Like, I don't know how in any system that you could grade Anthony Richardson high enough to justify picking him at 4th. I don't know how you could grade Levis that high either, frankly, because when I watch Levis on tape, I think he's robotic. I think he's got all the things that look like he's got a chance to be a player. But I want to know why Sean Clifford beat him out at Penn State, why he went to Kentucky.
Fair question.
Okay. And then when he's at Kentucky, you can say the offense wasn't great. Yeah, but there's plays on tape that you're wondering, like, what's he thinking and I don't see a quick-minded player. To me, it goes back to my upbringing, which is Walsh, which is rhythm. I don't see a rhythm player. I see a guy, he gets cover 5 against Georgia, 3rd and 11, and he knows it's cover 5, and he holds it, and he gets sacked. It's like, and he had an indicator before the play. So they brought the will out, brought him back in. He knew it was man coverage, so he kind of had it, and it's not fast. Now, he's athletic. He can throw it far. He can do all those things. But there's some downside to it. Look, there's always that shiny object in every draft. And if you go back and study how many blown picks are quarterbacks, Sam Darnold had a better collegiate career than Will Levis did at USC. There's a lot of Sam Darnold in Will Levis.
It's funny that you mentioned that there's been a lot of blown picks at the quarterback position. I think the 2011 draft is the biggest indicator. If you look at those top 15 picks, a lot of them are just all-pro, Pro Bowler, future Hall of Famer, and the guys who were not good were all the quarterbacks, other than Cam Newton.
Right.
Cam Newton went number 1, and it was like the Lockers, the Ponders, the Gabberts, those kind of guys that went at the top of the draft next to the Julio Jones, the A.J. Greens, the J.J. Watts, the Tyron Smiths, and all that stuff.
It's really kind of
it's kind of crazy.
It's the biggest. Again, You have
Von Miller at 2.
You have so many people in the draft that don't even understand how to evaluate a quarterback. And most scouts really don't. They really don't. Because they never put in their report what offense the player can most effectively work in. You know, what would we have to do with our football team if we drafted this player? What would we have to do? You know, would we have to have this kind of receiver, this kind of running back? You know, like Derek Carr, he goes to New Orleans, good, because he plays in warm weather. He doesn't like cold weather. He's in the dome. He's got a really good offensive line, and he's got skill players. Okay, so I get this, and he's got to play in the West Coast. So there you're going. But to me, I think that's why there's so much. That's why, to me, you can't make a mistake. You can't make a mistake on the pick.
Yeah, otherwise we'll be picking right at the top in a couple of years, and might be somebody else making the pick and not you.
Yeah, and I think so. But, you know, to me, I think it's risky. And the riskiest of all is the one I like the most is Richardson. You know, like I loved his athleticism, but there's a lot that has to get corrected in Richardson. A lot. And if he goes to a team that's going to fire the coach the next year, it's only going to keep going downward spiral.
And honestly, that's kind of why I like the Colts fit, is just that Steichen is in his first year, and they can take the time to develop this thing.
But they're going to be, if they draft him, they can't put him on the field.
No.
You can't play him.
You're punting the year, probably.
Yeah, do you want to punt do you think their owner wants to punt the year?
I think he wants a quarterback.
I mean, if they would have signed Sam Darnold, or if they would have signed, somebody that really who's been a starter for a long time in the league.
Yeah. Derek Carr.
If they would have signed Derek Carr,
the fans would have rioted.
But then you could draft Richardson.
Yeah.
But to me, you're punting the season. Look, I don't think the Colts are a disastrous team. There's a lot of games you could watch they beat Kansas City at home.
Isn't that crazy?
Right. So, they're not that bad of a team.
Yeah.
But they're not going to put some young quarterback out there who's going to turn the ball over and make mistakes, because it's going to be voluminous for Richardson to handle it.
Real quick before we head to break, are the Levis rumors true? There's been some rumblings about comes off a little cocky, comes off like a little brash.
I haven't heard that. I have not heard that. I think what Levis is, I think he's determined to prove that he has this it factor to him. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure it's real, because if he had that it factor, why didn't he beat out Clifford? You can't answer that. And what did I say in the last pod? The draft is always about why.
Yeah. It's one of the interesting questions of this NFL draft. On the other side, we're going to talk about a team that might be down in the dumps. That's the Arizona Cardinals next.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
All right, we kind of hinted at Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft when we were talking about Anthony Richardson. Well, let's talk about the top of this draft for Daniel Jeremiah, the lead NFL draft analyst over at NFL Network. And at number 1 for the Carolina Panthers, he has them selecting Alabama quarterback Bryce Young. So we have another person joining our Bryce Young camp here, Michael, on the GM Shuffle.
I just think, to me, that, as I keep saying, we had a Thor. I forget where he's from. He was on the Lombardi line on.
Is it Thor Nystrom?
Thor Nystrom, yep. Right. And we had him on, and he had Bryce Young going. He had C.J. Stroud going 1, and I said, "Who would you pick?" He said, "Well, I picked Bryce Young." And I said, "Why didn't you put him 1?" He said, "Well, because I hear Frank." I said, "Well, Frank Reich kind of messed up the Colts with his quarterback selections.
So why are we listening?
Why are we listening to Frank Reich here?" So, I think it's so obvious the tape for Bryce Young is the best. It's obvious that people are putting C.J. Stroud there 1 because they think Frank Reich has all this power in the organization.
They're projecting on the Frank Reich.
Like Frank Reich, David Tepper has all the power. And David Tepper is going to pick the best player, not the one that fits Frank. Frank Reich is disposable. You can get rid of him anytime, right? The guy that he's given up all these assets for, he wants to make sure is the best player. So to me, I think Daniel, he's got good sources in the league. I'm sure he's talked to enough people. The tape doesn't lie. At some point, we all as fans and bettors, we have to get back to the tape and not the story, not the narrative. And I think that Daniel's right. I think it's going to be Young. The tape is not even close. Everybody you ask, who's a better collegiate player? Oh, Bryce Young. And the fact is, if Bryce Young were 6'2",
we're not having this discussion.
We're not even having it. The Bears are picking him.
We're talking about who's Houston going to take it to. That's the whole thing of the draft, because it had been similar to a Trevor Lawrence situation. In his write-up on the mock draft, Dale Jeremiah said that the Panthers will do their homework on this year's top quarterback prospect over the next month, but I believe Young is the best of the bunch and will emerge as their target. And I go back to when they initially made that trade on that Friday a few weeks ago. It might have even been a month ago. It was before free agency kicked off. Adam Schefter at ESPN had the report that there is belief that David Tepper, who you just mentioned, the owner, likes Bryce Young. So that goes along with hey, Tepper, he's not making this pick solely. It's not just hey, Tepper says, here's your quarterback, make it work. But his voice is pretty loud in the room, obviously being the owner. It's
very loud. He okayed the trade. He gave they're his assets. Let's not forget that. I mean, it's the same thing that we heard that Jim Irsay at the press conference. Hey, that kid from Alabama looks really good. Look, it's hard to
anybody
dispute.
with eyes can see it,
right? Like for me, I've had a couple players this year. I'll give you an example. Okay, Anthony Richardson, love his talent. Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. I thought watching him collegiately, he was sensational. He was great. I thought he was a baby Gronk. But when you study him on tape, the TV is so different than the tape, right? He's not quite the same player on tape that he is as he is when you're watching him on television.
Yeah.
Or like Darnell Washington, the tight end from Georgia. You watch him on tape, you think, oh, he's just some big, thick blocking. No. No, this guy's actually a better receiver than he is a blocker. The perception is he's a blocker, but he's a completely different, he's a true Y, and he's so big. Vince Lombardi used to say this all the time. The hardest thing to do in sports is to evaluate quickness in big people. Because it's not Allen Iverson. You see it instantly. Yeah. It's kind of deceptive.
Doesn't look natural.
It doesn't look it. And Washington is so big and builds speed that he's more Gronk-like than I thought Michael Mayer were. But that's why TV scouting can really lead you down the wrong road. You've got to kind of watch the tape.
Yeah, Washington, he's a Vegas kid.
He is a Vegas kid. I mean,
Vegas.
Look, I think that kid could be, depending on his work habits, his character, all that stuff, because I don't know all that. But the skill set, he's inconsistent with his hands, but he's got unique ability.
Yeah, no, he's a part of that Georgia team that won back-to-back national titles. He wasn't even the best tight end on that team. And the Bowers kid will be next year.
That's more of an F. This kid's a Y. I mean, he still can block the edge. He's going to be an issue. He's going to be a problem for people when he's out there on the field.
The interesting thing with Bryce Young, because we all believe he's going to go in the top 2. I think that's the consensus. We believe it's going to be to Carolina. So does Daniel Jeremiah. So do some other draft analysts out there. But today, Bryce Young is visiting with the Las Vegas Raiders. So with Bryce Young presumably being a consensus top 2 selection, 2 being his floor, why would he take the visit to the Las Vegas Raiders?
Because let's just say C.J. Stroud goes 1, and Houston decides they want to go in another direction, that maybe the Raiders could trade up to get C.J. Stroud. I mean, here's the thing about the draft is unless you do all your homework, the biggest mistake in my career, and I take full accountability and full responsibility, is we just didn't have enough information on Warren Sapp. I relied on the league office to tell me something that wasn't true, and I didn't do my own homework. And so instead of picking Sapp where I should have picked him and not trading down, made a great trade, made a shitty pick, made a great trade with the 49ers, but made a shitty pick, and that has always reminded me that you just never know. So you have to do all your homework. It looks too obvious to not do it, but on draft day, it's something that you might need to have done. And why not? And if the kid's willing to come spend time with you, do it.
Warren Sapp is an interesting name because it kind of leads me to Jalen Carter, the Georgia defensive tackle, who I believe is the best player or the best defensive player in the draft.
I don't think that's I think that's clearly the case.
Yeah,
this Will Anderson love affair is a little over the top. I mean, it's a little over the top. Like, it's not Von Miller. Let's just be clear here.
People will lead you to believe that it is.
It's not. It's not. Carter is an old-fashioned 5 technique. He's a 7 technique. He's not a 9 technique to rush, but he's a 3 technique to rush. He can play anywhere in the line. He's got huge hands. He's got power. He's got elite quickness. No, he's the real deal. Yeah. Now, again, what's the off the field? What's the work habits? What's the real story? That's going to be the only reason he's not. To me, the only reason the Bears traded down is because of the off the field. I think the Bears stay where they are and don't go as far down as 9 if they felt like Carter was going to be, because they probably feel like they can't get Carter at 9.
Because if they felt that he was clean off the field, then it's like, okay, let's just trade to 4 or let's trade to 5 and then try to get Jalen Carter there. Because Carter this week, it was reported that he is not going to take visits with teams who are picking outside the top 10. And his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, who we've talked about a lot here on this podcast, knows the market. So that's almost, for me as a bettor who bets on like these draft props and all that stuff, it's an indicator that this kid's probably going top 10 at the absolute lowest.
If you called Drew on the phone and said, Drew, look, I got a really good chance to get to 8. Let this kid come see me. He's going to let the kid go. Yeah. Like he's just trying to create he's trying to make the market stronger than it is. Drew's smart. Like, so what's Drew's motivation for, that's what we never ask as fans, is what's his motivation for announcing that? Like his motivation is to heighten it, to make it seem like he's deflecting the off the field and now saying it's okay by saying, we know he's going in the top 10. Yeah. But he doesn't really know that. But he took a trip to Philadelphia. He doesn't have a top 10 pick.
Well, the Eagles do have a top 10 pick.
What are they, at 10?
They're at 10th, I believe.
All right, they're at 10. Okay, so they're just inside the number.
Can you imagine that? 14-3 top 10 pick?
They're just inside the number. All right, so great. But to me, he's strengthening his position, which isn't strong to begin with.
Yeah, no, I thought it was an interesting nugget there because let's say if Kansas City called him, hey, we want you to come on in. It's like, yeah, no, we're not going to Arrowhead. We're not going to go take that.
Yeah, but I mean, look, if I got all these picks I'm going to trade up, I'll do it unless he comes in here,
Yeah. So Carter, we believe, is the best defensive player. The Cardinals, who we talked about on the other side, they are picking at 3. Everyone and their mother has the Cardinals taking Will Anderson, the edge player out of Alabama. When you watch Anderson on tape, what is it that you see that people are missing?
I just don't see it. I don't see the explosiveness. I don't see the elite athletic skills. Like, I don't see I don't see a dominating player. I mean, let me ask you this question, Femi. If you're watching Alabama on defense and he's as good as everybody says, how do they give up 52 points? I mean, I watched Darrell Wright from Tennessee, who's a really good a really good player. Darrell Wright blocked him.
Stonewalled him.
Blocked him. Like, there's a lot of Darrell Wrights in the NFL. Now Darrell Wright could be a really good player. I know he's got some off the field. He had a bad childhood and all that stuff. I get that. But as terms of a player, like, to me, that tape goes way further than Will playing against, New Mexico State. Yeah. Like, that's a meaningless tape. You don't watch that. You watch a pro player play against a pro player. I don't see this. I don't see Von Miller. I don't see this. Oh, my God. I don't see the wow in Will Anderson. I haven't seen it all year. And maybe I got to go back and watch some junior tape of him. But to me, I think it's a guy who had a really good game and has gotten a lot of publicity. But to me, I don't get it. And again, you got to start from a negative position. And so he hasn't proven to me yet that, oh, my God, I got it. And when if Nick Saban against Tennessee, you can only run. They're in a 6-man protection. Right? They're never in a 7-man protection. So I don't want to hear this bullshit he's going to get doubled. Like he was being blocked by Wright pretty much the whole game. He was owned.
It's out there. And people, if you want to look it on Twitter, I've seen the clip of him just going up against Wright, and Wright it's not even close.
Just stones him.
It's not even close, just stonewalls, and he doesn't get anywhere near to the quarterback. And it just almost feels like it's the groupthink that we talk about all the time. Like, Will Anderson had the productive sophomore season. I believe he had like 17 or 18 sacks or so. He had all the hype heading into his final year in college, Heisman Trophy, dark horse, or whatever. And I think people just automatically assume.
And he's a great kid. Yeah. And Nick loves him, and I get all that. And I'm not saying he's not going to be a good pro player.
But we're not drafting for the Boy Scouts here.
I'm not saying he's not going to be a good pro player. I'm just saying he's not. Don't think he's coming in and getting 14 sacks his first year in the league. Like, there's just not enough eliteness in terms of when you watch him. I mean, you got to be careful.
Yeah, he seemed a little stiff to me when I watched him. I was just like, I see it. He's a good player, but
nobody's going to say a bad word. Nobody ever says that. Like, when you write a report, strong points, weak points. But when you listen to the draft coverage, you never hear any weak points.
It's interesting because when I watch Anderson, he kind of reminded me a little bit of Jadeveon Clowney, who has had a really good career in the NFL, his long career, but didn't quite live up to the hype of #1 overall pick. And I go back to that draft process, and it was Merrill Hodge, who at the time was working at ESPN, and he said, I would 1,000% take Khalil Mack over Jadeveon Clowney. And everybody looked at him like he was a crazy person. They're like, what do you mean? This is Clowney. Like, have you seen the plays? And like he's been a #1 recruit since high school and all that stuff. He's like, no, watching the tape, Khalil Mack is light years better than Clowney.
He's right.
And he was right.
He was right. And that you have to have conviction of the heart, right?
Yeah.
If we're all going to think alike, no one's thinking. Right? And that's why I go back to Thor. Thor, who's the best quarterback? Oh, it's Bryce Young. Well, then why are you giving C.J. Stroud to him? Well, because Frank Reich's insignificant in this whole thing. He's a pawn in the machine.
He's a big pawn piece. Now I'll give him credit.
But he's a pawn in the machine. He's not. I mean, David Tepper spent $5 billion to buy the Panthers. He's going to listen to Frank Reich. He's going to take his advice and counsel. Frank Reich just got fired in Indianapolis because he couldn't get a quarterback fixed.
Who does Scott Fitterer like? That's what we need to find out here.
I mean,
break the tie.
When Scott watches the tape, it's fairly obvious who he likes. Now, he's probably concerned about 5'10", just like I am. But the tape doesn't lie.
Oh, Scott Fitterer came from Seattle. They so happened to pick a quarterback who was under 6 feet.
There you go.
The short order cook.
Who ain't cooking.
They won a lot of games, though, back in the day.
It's strictly pancakes for him right now.
We'll see if we can move on to the eggs and the bacon, maybe in another podcast. But that does it for us on this edition of the GM Shuffle. Fun episode. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Thank you to all of you guys. Subscribe, rate, and review once again. Pump up those numbers, baby, because if you pump us up, then we can pump out more of these podcasts. Thank you to DraftKings. Thank you to V's. And thank you to you, Michael. And I'll talk to you on Monday.
Femi. I appreciate it.
Go Sixers?
Yeah, right. Don't get me started on that bullshit.
See you later.
Jesus Christ.